Saturday NFL DFS show that's unafraid to give the controversial takes. Some of these fades may work out, some of them may not, but we'll find out this week. I'm Chris Spags, joined as always by the top DFS player in the world, our Saturday pal here, one of the best minds in the world of fantasy analysis, Mr. Alex Osmo Baker. How are you doing, Alex?
Spags, man. Always excited to talk with you on Saturday. It's like going to church for me. I mean, this is my weekly kind of thing where we can all get together and talk. And I'm looking forward to discussing these plays, man, and having maybe a spiritual kind of approach today.
If only we had some crystals in the room to just complete the vibe that we're going for here. Maybe our other guest here does. Chris Randone, who's been just really doing double duty today, did the NFL strategy show, working hard on the grind here. How are you doing, Chris? Welcome on the contrary.
I'm great, man. I didn't know that I'd be coming here to take communion, but I mean, I guess, yeah, I'm ready, man. This sounds different. And to be honest with you, I have a lot of crystals in this room, believe it or not. So I'm prepped and I'm ready.
Chris Rendon capturing all the positive energy on all of our behalves, and we appreciate that. And also, we are not powered just by energy crystals. We're also powered by Fantasydraft, of course, the premier daily fantasy sports app out there. And it is the only place you will find rake-free daily fantasy out in the world. There's nowhere else on the DFS landscape where you'll get that rake-free daily fantasy. Let's go check them out right now because they're bringing the heat once again. $500,000 guaranteed rake-free contest, the Hooters main event. One of our guys, Shit My Money, had a lot of success in it last week. Alex, you also finished on top there. Tell me, how's Fantasydraft doing for you? And also this week on the rake you saved with that big win you had on Fantasydraft, what could you buy with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not all about the rake saved. It's about the money you win too. And I found that out last week. Of course, not as much as our boy Adam Scherer, who finished first in the tournament, got himself a cool 100K. But the fact that they don't charge rake on the tournament just made the prize that I won for third place a lot higher. I think it was like 25 or 30 grand, and that's pretty nice for a $28 entry. If that was a different site, I mean, a lot of their marquee main events only give maybe like 10% to third place, and I came away with much more. And that just shows like that money that you say on rake, that's just money you're winning at the end of the day.
I like to, you don't even know. I know it was 30K because I saw Adam screenshot a bunch of times, lovingly posting. But yeah, go check it out. I mean, look, Adam's winning money on there. Alex is winning money on there. We are playing the site now. I'm playing this week. I'm sure Chris is playing there as well. A lot of our guys, it's just a smart place to be playing. There's been a lot of overlay, a lot of opportunity for you out there. If you go to fantasydraft.com right now, use that promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, for your free 7-day trial and your first $1,000 in rake free entries. Let's go check it out right now at fantasydraft.com. Support them because they're helping us put on this show every week. And Chris, it's exciting to have you here, man, because you've been doing a lot of quality work. You're doing shows with Sal and Manny, two very smart guys as well. The NFL Strategy Show, of course, every morning at 11 a.m. On the East Coast, 8 a.m. Pacific time. Chris, what have you learned from these guys? Because Manny's a very sharp guy. Sal also a very sharp voice out there. Have you picked up anything this year from those guys?
Yeah, I think Manny helps you really understand Fantasy Cruncher on a deeper level. And I mean, he's fundamentally sound with it. So never really utilized grouping before. And I think, working with him and discussing Fantasy Cruncher with him has really kind of elevated my, Fantasy Cruncher skill set. And then Sal is just like I told him this morning, I'm like, dude, you're like an NFL encyclopedia of numbers. Like you just know all these numbers. And, what's great about that is that he looks at certain stats that normally I never really looked at before in previous years. So now I've kind of like broadened my horizons as far as what I look at on a deeper level as far as stats is concerned. So it's like the best of both worlds with these two. I use Sal for the stats, and I put the stats inside Fantasy Cruncher with Manny.
Yeah, look, these shows are really great, and you've been doing a great job with those guys as well. But every NFL strategy show, I always enjoy doing the one with Lofty where we do the ownership breakdown on Wednesdays. But honestly, if you haven't been checking out the strategy shows, they're obviously one of the most viewed shows that we have on the channel, but they are very worth checking out. So make sure to tune in every morning because we have different angles on each day. And guys like Manny and Chris and Sal and Lofty, of course, doing a great job every day as well. I think it's a really worthwhile show, so make sure to check that out. In addition to On the Contrary, of course, being your capper here for the home stretch. But Alex, I think one quick thing for you this week. I just wanted to hit on. I guess, how are you feeling about the NFL? Because you've now had 4 weeks. It's been kind of a shifting league where it feels like the tides have been changing kind of underneath our feet. How are you feeling about the NFL? And has there been anything weird this year compared to previous years? You're obviously playing a ton of volume each season.
Yeah, I haven't noticed anything that much in the stats. I mean, we're seeing over-unders be about the same as previous years. So any sort of a narrative where they're like calling penalties or maybe reversing touchdowns because of pass interference reviewing and stuff like that, I haven't really seen that be like a huge factor. But the thing I really love about this time of year is we have 4 weeks of information available to us, and we can kind of see the trends start to form, and we have a lot of information to go off of to make our decisions, and that kind of makes it possible to gain even more of an edge because I mean, a lot of the casual users maybe like will play for the first few weeks, and then the competition gets a little bit stiffer as you go. So you got to really up your game by taking advantage of all the data available.
You have more tools in your tool belt right now as we get more data in there. And of course, you can get more data in your life. If you go to osmo.com/join right now, use the promo code contrary to save half off your first month of Osmo Plus. And of course, you can also get packages as low as $3.95 a week on there right now. Our express packages, which are really helpful. NBA season coming up too. Going to be having those as well. But get the all sport pass because right now it is NFL season, MLB content going on as well for the playoffs. We have a ton of stuff with all the sports going on. NHL, our guys, Jake Hari, Nolan doing a great job over there. So go check out all that content we have at osmo.com/join. All right, guys, let's get to the first game we should hit on here, which getting a lot of buzz industry-wide, one in which there are one fast-paced team. We've talked about Arizona as a concept being kind of the Coors Field of the NFL over the last few weeks. And last week for Seattle, that didn't quite pan out as well as people would have wanted with that game stack, but still good value in that game. And now it does look like Arizona and Cincinnati is going to have some ownership on them. A lot of players here projecting well for you, Alex. So I think there's just so many plays here. I'm just going to turn it over to you. Who are your favorite plays in this game? Because again, we're going to have pace and a decent team total here. Not a fantastic one, but decent enough one, especially for Cincinnati.
I think this is really the game that sharp players are going to go to this week because Cincinnati just got completely obliterated versus the Steelers in that Monday night game last week. And so I think people are going to be really down on the Steelers or on the Bengals, where they're in such a good matchup versus Arizona. Not only does Arizona play at a fast pace, but they also don't have a great defense. And that combination really makes it ideal for any team facing them, even the Bengals. And John Ross and AJ Green being out just means that there's going to be some low price guys that are going to get more touches than they usually do.
Yeah. Chris, how are you feeling about it? Because there's going to be more pace here. We have a good amount of ownership going to guys like Auden Tate, who'll be filling in. John Ross on the IR because he's going to be out for a while, if not the whole year. Auden Tate, one of the better value players on the slate. Tyler Eifert, also a pretty good value, who's going to find some ownership. How are you feeling about the Cincinnati players here? And I guess who are your favorite parts?
I think Auden Tate makes a lot of sense. And I mean, for good reason, though. I mean, he has more red zone targets than Boyd, 3-1. And he's not just being plugged in this week as a filler for John Ross. The last 2 weeks, he's really established himself in the game, in the passing game. I mean, seeing at least over 85% of the snaps. And I mean, not only that, though, he's getting targets, 10 targets in week 3, 6 targets in week 4. And I mean, he's in a great situation with facing a lot of weak corners. So I feel like the relationship there with Dalton is nothing to be fearful of, considering the fact that if we're going to compare this to maybe last week of Trey Quinn and Paul Richardson, completely different situation as far as Dwayne Haskins coming in, and it really messed up a lot of those value plays. But with Auden Tate, I feel like it's definitely makes sense in cash. And I mean, in tournaments, it gives you that roster construction flexibility because of his price point. And I think Eifert's in a weird situation because he's not getting as many looks as we would want. If you compare this to Disley is someone that I guess you can see Wilson does go to. But I guess the positive thing is that he does have 4 red zone targets. He has scored a touchdown this year. But if he's only going to get 5 targets a game like he normally has, and we're hoping that maybe he gets some more of Ross's targets, the thing is we need him to score. So I'm just hoping that if you're going looking to roster him, we definitely need a score from Eifert to pay off.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And Auden Tate, too, just I think to dwell on him a little bit more, he did run 43 routes in that last Monday night game that Alex mentioned against the Steelers, which is right there with Tyler Boyd. And that's, certainly the assumption that he'll see even more opportunity without Ross in there. Ross getting about 8 targets a game right now. Alex, how are you feeling about the Auden Tate play? Because he's a value play. He's going to be very chalky, bit of an unproven commodity, but a guy who's looked good, and he kind of just visually as well. He's got the kind of body build you want to see even outside.
I haven't really checked that out yet.
He's lanky. He's a big dude. I'm not talking like he's not sexy. I don't know. Maybe he is. I don't. I'll look him up right now. I'll tell you guys.
Yeah, let's get back to us on that.
So supposedly he weighs 28 more pounds than any defender as far as corners on the team. I think that's what Sal said this morning. He went to it a little bit deeper as far as the body weight. So when it comes to body weight, he's a beast of a guy compared to anyone as far as the secondary on the Cardinals.
He's handsome. He's got a good shape up right now. So I'll confirm that. No, but he's like a tall dude. He's definitely got some muscle on him. And a guy who does seem like he should be able to do well against an Arizona team who, in that secondary, I mean, they really have not been good on the year. So I guess, Alex, relative to the field, if Auden Tate's going to be one of the chalk plays of the week, how do you handle that for a guy who's kind of an unproven commodity, but does present a pretty good value opportunity?
I think the details matter a lot here. So Auden Tate, he has run 98 routes according to PFF this year, and he's been targeted 18 times. So that's almost 20% of the time that he's out on the field, he's getting a target, which is a very high rate for just kind of a replacement player. And the reason why he hasn't racked up a ton of targets yet to this point is because he just hasn't been on the field not as much as Boyd, as much as Ross this year. So I think now that he's a full-time player in the Bengals offense, he should really be a high-value player. So for that reason, I'm willing to really go for him, despite the fact that he's going to be highly owned.
Yeah, he has been a guy too. He did supplant Damian Willis earlier in the year, a guy who was running a lot of routes in the beginning of the season. And I think, they do seem like they have some hopes for him. And, the talent seems to be there. As Alex mentioned, he's been catching the ball pretty well. I think he's looking good out there. So I'm intrigued by Auden Tate, and I think the ownership on him is certainly scary. I guess, would you go to any pivots here? Joe Mixon, a guy, Alex, who you have projected for fairly well. Would you be building some lines perhaps without Auden Tate, focused on Mixon, maybe including Boyd?
Yeah, I'm not locking him in. I'll have plenty of lineups without him, but I think he is probably one of the best plays of the slate. Joe Mixon, also a very good play. On certain sites, he's priced super down as well. He's been a little bit injured in the first couple of games, so he hasn't really put up the fantasy numbers you would like necessarily. But I think he's fully healthy now, and when he's been healthy, he's gotten a large majority of the work over Bernard. So I think he makes a lot of sense too.
Chris, how are you feeling about Andy Dalton? Because we are going to have ownership on Mixon. We're going to have ownership on Eifert. We're going to have ownership on Tate, a good amount on Boyd as well. So logically, the quarterback should get some ownership, but he's not getting a ton. I think people are certainly afraid to go to Andy Dalton, given what they saw probably on that Monday night game. Are you willing to go to Andy Dalton at a decent price, but also a good amount of upside, given his targets are pretty well owned?
I think, one thing, he does turn over the ball. I think he's 4 interceptions the last 3 games. But another thing is I would think maybe it's okay to go to him if you're looking to game stack this. I feel like he definitely has somewhat of an upside. However, though, I feel like there's just another quarterback or two that are in his price range that are more appealing to me. So necessarily, I don't really see him as someone who's being valuable to me.
Okay. And how about the other side, Chris? Because I do have, Arizona here. We have no Christian Kirk in there. He's a guy who's been really highly targeted, getting over 9 targets a game this year. We do have some guys who could be filling in. Keyshawn Johnson, the assumption is he'll be running more routes. Andy Isabella could get back in the mix. There are some guys that can go to. And of course, Larry Fitzgerald, the ageless Larry Fitzgerald. It's really good this year, also getting 9 targets a game. Who are you willing to go to on the Arizona side?
I really think David Johnson's in a great spot. And I know he's high owned for great reason. But, I mean, for me, he's projected high just as much as Ezekiel Elliott. And Dalvin Cook, just by a little bit, actually, especially on DraftKings because of the PPR. So, I mean, if you look at him, he's got 20 targets over his last 2 games. The only thing that concerns me is the fact that, his rushing, the offensive line is not good of Arizona. So as you've seen kind of throughout the season so far through 4 games, they haven't really been able to establish a run. But looking at Cincinnati and how horrible they are against the run, they've really struggled against the 49ers, and they struggled this past week against Jalen Samuels and James Conner. There was just no good front 4 that could stop them on any type of defensive scheme. So if that continues, I feel like Arizona might be able to establish the run here more, regardless of their offensive line. And with obviously the pass catching opportunities for David Johnson, I feel like it's the best of both worlds for him. And I feel like there's a lot of upside with David Johnson on this.
Yeah, as Chris mentioned, that is a very poor offensive line. According to PFF, a 41 grade in run blocking for Arizona, which is one of the worst numbers in the league. But still, David Johnson getting a lot of targets, 11 targets last week. Alex, how are you feeling about David Johnson's prospects here in a spot where there should be some points and also just a need for him to get more touches?
I like him. Anytime you're facing a weaker team like the Bengals, running backs are going to be more appealing because there's more chance that they kind of dominate the game and rack up a big fantasy points. And David Johnson, of course, can get it done as a pass catcher as well. So I like him a lot this week, given that the Cardinals prospects are pretty good. And I think that Christian Kirk and Damiere Byrd being out make it so that there's some interesting value plays on the Cardinals as well.
Who are you willing to go to on the Cardinals as value? Are you looking at Keyshawn Johnson? Or are you considering Andy Isabella?
I think Larry Fitzgerald obviously is my number one play, not the contrarian one that you're asking for here. But I'm a little bit hesitant to take more than a few shots on the other guys. I'm expecting Trent Sherfield to be out there most of the game at the slot receiver spot. He's not a guy that has been especially productive when he's been on the field in the past. And then they have Pharaoh Cooper in the mix. Someone who hasn't really produced at the pro level aside from special teams. And I expect those guys are going to get the snaps over Andy Isabella just because of the position. And Keyshawn Johnson just hasn't been out there quite as much as I would like. So not super bullish on him, but I'll be taking some stabs at all these guys. This is kind of a dart throw.
Chris, how are you feeling about the wide receiver core here? Are you in on Larry Fitzgerald, or are you willing to go to some of these cheap guys who could see some more opportunity at least, even if they're not going to get the same amount of targets that Christian Kirk did?
I think Larry Fitzgerald is probably in a good spot, especially if Dre Kirkpatrick is essentially guarding him. He's by far their worst corner and has been getting torched all season. I mean, he's given up 2 touchdowns, almost 200 yards, over 13 completions thrown his way. So really think Larry Fitzgerald would be in a good spot. The other guys I really can't trust much. Really don't know kind of what they're capable of doing. The sample size is small. I mean, I'm not going to, put my trust in Andy Isabella. Yeah, he has some speed. He could be in the slide. He might move him to the outside. Keyshawn Johnson is a little bit interesting, but I mean, or Damiere Byrd. I mean, but at the end of the day, I think I would roster Kyle Murray with Fitzgerald if I would stack them. If not, then I would run Murray as a naked quarterback because of the rush opportunity.
Interesting. All right. Also, Alex, the YouTube chat, and I saw this after we started the show, so my apologies for not asking about it. Are you okay? Your car had some issues. Check out the tweet on @OsmoDFS right now if you want to see the damage. But how are you doing, Alex? Are you all right?
Yeah, so my friends rented an Airbnb for the weekend, so I'm going out there to hang out. And on the way to the airport, I was in an Uber, and it just got totally destroyed by a car behind it because there was some traffic and the car didn't stop. So it took about an hour off my day, and my head got hit a little bit, but not bad. So I figured, these guys in the NFL get hit way harder on a regular basis. So who am I to wimp out and go to the hospital, right? So I just kept going. I had NHL projections to post this morning, MLB, and of course this show. So the show must go on.
Wow, your sacrifice, much like Creed, your sacrifice, much appreciated. But man, that was a nasty wreck. We're glad you're okay, and my apologies for not catching that earlier.
The highway was like shut down completely for 30 minutes, like one of the biggest highways in Chicago. It was like a big deal. There were like a bunch of cars involved.
Jesus. Well, all right. Well, you know what, guys, hit that like button because Alex's sacrifice means a lot to all of us out there for the NHL projection, for all the things he's doing, including the show. So please hit the like button to show a little love because nothing heals concussion better than a like on YouTube. That's what I do. Medical doctors. Let's keep going, though. After you guys hit that like button, Atlanta at Houston, another game where it seems like there's got some shootout potential here. Two teams who really have passed the ball, at least, especially Atlanta, passing the ball quite a bit. Alex, Matt Ryan, one of your better projected quarterbacks on the week in terms of value and points. So let's talk about that first. The Atlanta side, a team where there really are some weapons here. Now, they are kind of spreading the ball around a bit more, not relying just on the Julio Jones, who's an obvious target, who's always going to have the value. But Austin Hooper getting over 8 targets a game. He's going to be a chalky play. Calvin Ridley's had some successes here, not a ton. Mohamed Sanu also running a lot of routes, had a kind of under the radar nice week last week. How are you feeling about this Atlanta attack, Alex?
Well, Houston is a tough team to play against, so I think Atlanta's going to have to pass the ball a lot like usual. And Atlanta's always a team that comes up in my top stacks tool because they just throw at such a high rate. Matt Ryan doesn't run the ball a lot. And that means that when you pick him and you pick a couple receivers, you're getting 100% correlation between those players. So that's really nice. And that's why Atlanta frequently is highly projected on my top stacks tool. This week, it's a little site specific on DraftKings. Matt Ryan is supposed to be pretty popular. On Yahoo, he's super contrarian. And on Fantasydraft, he's somewhere in between. So my strategy is going to depend a little bit on that. And the receivers, I mean, he's got 4 really good players to throw to: Ridley, Jones, Hooper, and Sanu. And I'll just kind of mix and match them, whatever fits in my lineup.
Chris, how are you feeling about this Atlanta passing attack? And I guess also Devonta Freeman, who's kind of had a little bit of a rejuvenation here, getting some more touches, a little more involved overall. How are you feeling about Atlanta overall? And I guess, are you willing to get some of the chalky plays here like Austin Hooper, who looks to me like a really solid tight end play, but the ownership's going to be pretty high on him?
Yeah, Austin Hooper has just solidified himself as a really valuable tight end for Matt Ryan, and I think Alex made a great point. They're just a pass first team. The running game just really hasn't been able to be established, and the thing is that the offensive line is a little bit weak, but more importantly, they have a lot of weapons on this wide receiver core, and I think for this matchup, it's interesting because there's 2 corners that I would want to target in Jonathan Joseph and Aaron Colvin in this matchup. And I think Ridley's going to get the matchup with one of them, which I feel Ridley is probably in the best situation. He's got really explosive speed. He can break out big plays. And I love Julio in this matchup as well. I think Sanu is fine. I think all these guys are fine. And I mean, when you have a guy in Matt Ryan who is, especially on DraftKings, he's 5,900. He's hit the 300-yard point bonus every single week. He's even gotten up to 51 attempts in one game, and the rest, he's in the 40s. So for me, looking at it, they're going to have opportunities to make plays. They're going to have targets, and it's just a really good matchup, in my opinion, especially with some of these weak people in the secondary for Houston Texans.
Yeah, Matt Ryan averaging 313 yards per game. So that has been a lock for the 300-yard bonus. When you are averaging more than 300, that's my analysis on that. But certainly a guy who's throwing out a lot of volume. On the other side, Deshaun Watson, a guy who's been sacked quite a bit, but he's going against an Atlanta team who's had a really tough time generating pressure. Just a 4% sack rate for Atlanta going against Houston. And Deshaun Watson, if he's not getting pressured, if he's not taking those stupid sacks that he often takes because of his bad offensive line, and just the fact that he holds onto the ball quite a bit, he should have some opportunity here. Alex, how are you feeling about Deshaun Watson? Because he projects well for you, but he looks like he might be the chalk QB of the week.
Yeah, I like him. I think that Atlanta is a great matchup, and they're one that you can make a nice game stack out of too because they have so many good options. The running back position in Houston is a little bit tough to get a lot of fantasy value out with Johnson, Duke Johnson, and Carlos Hyde kind of being a 50-50 split. But you got Hopkins in there, which makes it a pretty easy guy to pair with Watson. So I think you can make some stacks there. And then I think Will Fuller's price has really come down across the industry because he hasn't done a lot, but he's out there like most of the game, and he's a good deep threat. So he makes a nice GPP play.
Would you be more interested in Will Fuller if Kenny Stills is out? He's currently a game time decision. I think they would maybe err on the side of him not playing, but one would think that would open up more opportunity for Fuller.
It could if they run more 2 wide sets. If they're leading in the game, that's probably how they're going to run out there. But if they're behind, I'm expecting Kiki Kuti to be in a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, and he gets targeted at a pretty decent rate. So that should take some work away from Fuller and from Hopkins. So not the greatest situation in the world compared to last year where they ran 2 wide a lot of the time. But still, I mean, it's a great matchup.
Chris, how are you feeling about this Houston passing attack? Because Deshaun Watson seems like he's due for bigger days, hasn't quite had monster days, been steady for the most part. And certainly the same is true for DeAndre Hopkins, who hasn't had that breakout day. People in the chat right now apparently a little tilted over him not quite hitting that ceiling in the last few weeks. How are you feeling about the Houston passing here?
Yeah, with this matchup, I want to say something about Will Fuller because on FanDuel, I really like Hollywood Brown or Calvin Ridley because they're all in kind of that same price point area. And the thing with Will Fuller is, when you look at his overall game, a lot of people have been talking about his air yards and, how many air yards he's had and how many missed throws that Watson has had to him because he's been open. So he's had 399 air yards, but only 27 yards after the catch. It's actually one of the lowest breakdowns as far as them combined. When you look at air yards compared to yards after catch, it's one of the lowest amongst all wide receivers. But when you look at his actual game, he's had 3 catches for over 25 yards through 4 games, and each catch was once in each game. And outside of those 3 catches, 1 for 54, 1 for 28, 1 for 30, he's only had 11 catches after that for a total of 68 yards. So he's actually averaging 2.75 receptions for 17 yards throughout the remaining receptions that he's had. And I say this because, for a wide receiver, he's not really getting the big plays that, we're anticipating or what he's capable of doing. And I'd rather go Hopkins in this matchup, to be quite honest with you. The yardage for defensively for Atlanta, they're the 7th best defensive ranked team when it comes to pass yards. So I'm curious to see kind of how they approach this. Will we see more of the run game, or will we see Watson be able to, not only rush, but, make big plays? But as far as, who else is available at those price points, I would really like to go the route of Hollywood Brown or Calvin Ridley as compared to Will Fuller, especially with the recent struggles of Watson in this offense.
It's interesting. Yeah, you're pointing that out. A lot of interesting things about Fuller here, because you're right. He actually has been minus 2.4 yards after catch under expectation. So we're expecting him to get about 2.4 more yards than he's currently getting. A bit of a surprise given his rep as a burner and just the fact that he's broken so many big plays. Maybe due for some positive regression, though. So, that is something also to keep in mind. Let's keep going here because I think we kind of covered this one about as well as we need to. Alex, I think this is a game that you're interested in. Green Bay at Dallas, and both defenses here have been decent, though I think maybe you might not be buying that quite as much, at least based on some things I've seen you say and tweet this week. How are you feeling about this matchup here? Because it does seem like one where people will want to favor Ezekiel Elliott, will want to favor the run game with him and Aaron Jones, who has no Jamal Williams breathing down his neck this week. How are you feeling about the overall game? And I guess, would you prefer the running backs, or do you want to get some passers in there?
I think it's going to be a great game. Green Bay and Dallas, two really good teams. Definitely going to be the one I want to watch this week. But I don't know if it'll be great for DFS because Green Bay has been pretty good at defense this year so far. Dallas, also a strong team. So it's kind of a situation where I don't really see either team having a plus matchup. I have noticed Green Bay has given up a lot of yards per rushing attempt this year, about 5, which is about 10% worse than average. So maybe that's a bump to Ezekiel Elliott a little bit. But I think that they'll probably keep him in the 20 rushing attempts range that he's been in. And if he's on pace to go more than 20, they're going to sub in Tony Pollard. Last week, they didn't have to do that because he only ran 18 times. But I'm not totally buying into the idea that Ezekiel Elliott is just kind of going to go back to his 2018 usage.
Interesting. Yeah, you mentioned a good point about the Green Bay defense. They are giving up that 5 yards per rush, giving up 142 rushing yards per game. And also, according to PFF, a pretty poor run defense grade for them as well. It's the 56th grade and also not a great tackling grade. So theoretically, all things that would help out for Zeke with some yards after contact, a little bit low for him, just 2.7 yards after contact. That seems like he should be better than that. Chris, how are you feeling about the Dallas run game here? And I guess, do you have any interest in the pass catching options as well with Michael Gallup back out there? Amari Cooper certainly has done some damage, but Green Bay has looked good.
I think Michael Gallup helps Zeke in the running game, but I think it's also fair to take note that Green Bay has given up 7 touchdowns this year to running backs. We've seen the last 2 weeks, they've struggled significantly. One against the combo of Lindsey and Royce Freeman, who absolutely torched them on 36 carries for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not only to mention that, they also hurt them in the pass catching field as well. I believe they had 8 catches for 59 yards, and there was just really no answer for them. And then on the opposite end, we have Jordan Howard this past week, who not necessarily someone you would think would torch the Packers, but did. Both in the running game and passing game, was able to score 3 touchdowns. And it seems as if that they're just struggling to really find an answer outside of the passing game to really focus on the running game. So now we have someone who's a predominantly one of the best running backs in the league against a really good offensive line, who also will be missing Smith in the offensive line, which that hurts them a bit. But I feel like with this game plan and with the way with Gallup being back, it gives them more of a threat on offense because they can now run a little bit more wider sets, and that'll be at least more emphasis on not stacking the box as much. And I think that will give opportunity for Zeke.
Yeah, Tyron Smith not being out there is a big deal, but I think that does hurt Dak Prescott more than it probably hurts Zeke. And also Lyle Collins also questionable, so there could be some problems for that offensive line. But still, it does seem like when Green Bay's run defense has been so bad that Zeke should find some opportunity, even if he doesn't quite have the touch floor that he had last year with over 25 touches per game. How about the Green Bay side, Alex? Because Aaron Jones is going to be decently owned, and Dallas also not great versus the run, though not quite as erroneous overall as Green Bay has been.
I think that Jamal Williams being out is certainly a boost to Aaron Jones, so I have some interest, but I'm finding him a little bit too expensive for this situation where Dallas, a pretty tough team to be matched up against. It's hard to be really bullish on the Packers in general. And also, they may have to throw the ball more. One thing that is worth noting is that Devontae Adams is out this week. And that could mean there's some value in the wide receiver position with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Geronimo Allison. And if you really want to be contrarian, Chris, I know this is getting you interested here. Jake Kumara, the preseason king.
Chris, how are you feeling about Jake Kumara here? Because no Devontae Adams, certainly going to open up a lot of targets, though Green Bay not passing quite as much this year. If they are falling behind, they certainly could have to pass more. So, Chris, how are you feeling about the Packers' options here? And is Jake Kumara going to be a lock for you?
Man, are you saying Jake Kumara is going to be a lock?
For you, maybe. I don't know. Probably not for everybody.
Nah. I'm staying away from cheap guys moving forward, I think, especially after last week. Just didn't really go that well. I mean, to be quite honest with you, the Cowboys secondary has been relatively strong. I think if I'm correct, I think Byron Jones is the only one to have given up a pass play of a touchdown. Outside of that, every other corner and safety has really shut down opposing offenses of scoring, not only in the red zone scoring, but also really keeping them in the red zone as far as shutting down big play opportunities. So for me personally, I really like the Cowboys defense to some extent, but not to roster them, but just to know that this could be a matchup where we see a little bit more defense. And I think we kind of seen that last week against the Saints as well, really holding Mike Thomas to those short catches and not necessarily big plays. The speedster and Valdes-Scantling is a little interesting, but to be quite honest with you, the Cowboys defense, I think, is a little underrated. They're pretty strong. The only two people I'm concerned about would be Van Der Esch and Jalen Smith, and these are both linebackers. And so here, I really like Jimmy Graham. I think Jimmy Graham has the most upside in this game. He's pretty cheap on DraftKings, and I think that there's a lot of potential there. Both linebackers, and Van Der Esch and Jalen Smith, have struggled significantly against tight ends, giving up 2 touchdowns and I think over 200 yards or just around 200 yards. So, I mean, for me personally, this is a great matchup. And I think there's going to be a lot of checkdowns, and I think we'll see a lot of passes go to Jimmy Graham's way.
Alex, how are you feeling about Jimmy Graham? And also, I'm noticing now you actually have a decent projection on Jake Kumara, and he does have a 100% catch rate on the year on his 5 targets per game. So I guess, how are you feeling about these pass game options here? And would you like Jimmy Graham? Would you like Kumara? Who would be the guy you'd want to go to who's going to fill that void with Devontae Adams out?
Well, 100% catch rate. I mean, we can just take that to the bank. So
never going to drop. That's just how it goes.
I think I'm not really landing on a ton from this game. Jimmy Graham certainly is fine, but he's not really standing out to me at the tight end position like some other guys more. And then I think these guys are just a little bit too expensive in general with Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He got a little bit of a price bump. He's 56 on DraftKings, where he was 4,800 last week. Tough matchup. So I'm not super keen on it, but I could see some contrarian stacks with Aaron Rodgers because we project them to be pretty low on this week.
Yeah, I think that checks out. Let's keep going to another NFC North team who is in an interesting spot this week. Dalvin Cook is going to be pretty highly owned, borderline chalky, you could say, but also the passing game. A lot of narrative things that you could say. We talked about a little bit before we came on the air. But Minnesota, a lot of grousing about the pass game. Stephon Diggs reportedly wanted a trade, and he didn't really deny it in kind of an odd way as well. Adam Thielen airing out his grievances on Kirk Cousins' local radio show with him. Kirk Cousins taking mea culpas, not getting him the ball after he watched the game film, and he felt bad about it. So, Alex, I'll ask you first here, and this is certainly a narrative thing, not a data thing, but you did have these guys pretty well projected going into the year. Is this a game where the Minnesota passing offense maybe shows off a bit more against the Giants team, who is terrible? And they had success last week against Dwayne Haskins, but Dwayne Haskins is just not good.
Man, the Vikings have been really disappointing. That prevailing wisdom that they would run the ball more this year that I didn't buy into actually came true. I have them at a base rushing rate of about 48%, which is one of the highest in the league. Since they have a better than average matchup for them, I think they're going to rush closer to 50% of the time. I mean, there is this narrative, but I'm just as willing to take a stand against the narrative because this seems like a matchup versus the Giants where they could easily just dominate on the defensive end and not have to throw it a ton. And I think as long as they get the W, Thielen and Diggs should be happy enough.
Interesting. Okay. I like that take. I don't know that seems to work for Diggs so far, but I guess when you are winning, that certainly heals a lot of ills. Chris, how are you feeling here about the pass game? Because, a lot of things swirling, and sometimes you do have to just give the guys what they want when it's a squeaky wheel thing. But as Alex mentioned, so this is a defense who can shut things down, and Dalvin Cook is also a guy who can just bring the hammer over and over again on the Giants.
Yeah, I think they're going to be running predominantly with the run game, but I think that what we've seen recently with the unhappiness and the discussions that have been had is the fact that, you're 2-2 right now. And, you're on the brink of, you can go one of two directions. You can really help the culture of this team and get everyone involved, or you can continue to avoid, two great wide receivers. And, since we've seen Kirk Cousins, I mean, he has 99 pass attempts. I believe it's the lowest in the league. And he has two really good, if not two top 10, top 15 wide receivers possibly, considering the fact what they've done over the last couple of years, and Thielen and Diggs. And, this is a game where I think that they can make a statement offensively with the passing game. They have a great matchup against this Giants secondary that's not only weak, but very inexperienced. And Janoris Jenkins and DeAndre Baker are definitely two corners that you want to target. And I'm not going to count last week. I feel like last week was an anomaly. It was not necessarily a matchup to brag about, especially with Dwayne Haskins coming in for 3 quarters and being fully unprepared. Terry McLaurin was out as well. So it was an offense we're not going to talk about. Yes, they did shut them down. However, though, this is a much different team with a really good running game. And I think this running game and that threat of the running game, I think they could be stacking the box. And I think they might test Kirk Cousins to throw. But I think overall, he needs to throw more. And I think he needs to make his wide receivers happy. And I think they need to create a culture where everyone's happy as well, because everyone's playing together and scoring. So, I love this play. I love the ownership. They're very low owned. Their prices have gone down. And I think that there's a lot of upside there with Thielen and Diggs.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's also possible, too, that these guys can have enough to placate themselves where they get a touchdown and, like a 70-yard day. And that could be enough for them, and because they're probably not going to need a whole lot here with the Giants attack, who should be mostly thwarted by the Minnesota defense. But, maybe there is a kind of middle ground here where the prices really aren't down enough, I think is kind of the issue. And Alex, I guess, how are you feeling about the ownership? Because these guys aren't too highly owned, it looks like, with at least our most recent run of ownership projections. Where are you willing to come with the field? Like, you're not a big buyer on the pass game, but at single-digit ownership, maybe they're worth some shares?
Yeah, I think that they could make sense in the game stack where you're stacking up maybe Golden Tate. He's coming back for the Giants, and depending on the site, man, he's just like insanely low price. On FanDuel, I believe he's the minimum price. And this is a guy who is usually the number 1 wideout on the team. So I think that if you want to do a stack with some Giants players, including Tate, that could make sense because you're building this narrative into your lineup that Minnesota not only will want to pass the ball, but they'll have to.
Chris, how are you feeling about the Giants here? Because Wayne Gallman last week, an errant fate of the week called by me, in which he just got there, even though not the most impressive looking back, still a guy who got 2 touchdowns, did have the opportunity, did see good volume, and also a lot of volume in the pass game. Any Giants of interest to you, including Gallman?
Not necessarily. Someone I do like that's interesting is I do like Sterling Shepard. I feel like still right now where he's at with his price point, even with Tate back, I feel like Tate probably will take a little bit of, shadowing off of him. So, I mean, other than that, though, I don't think Gallman is the answer this week. I think last week was the play for Gallman, and it was the play and the only play for Gallman of this year, probably. But I think the matchup is a little bit more difficult this time around. And I feel like it's just not a good matchup for him, and not worth his price point either. I feel like there's other people in his area that I could look to or pay up a little bit more and get better results from.
It's also, I think also one thing to note too with the game, because we talked about Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate. Golden Tate mostly does operate out of the slot, and Sterling Shepard has been seeing the majority of the routes out of the slot, so that could certainly change things a bit around. Evan Ingram as well, seeing some slot routes that could go down. So things could be really fungible here. And, I'm not sure that Minnesota's a spot where you want to go a ton to attack rather their defense with a lot of fungible pieces that are figuring things out, but we'll find out. Let's keep going, guys. And again, please do hit that like button because the likes help us out a bunch. And of course, the picks are only as good and the data is only as good as the amount of likes we have. Please help us out right now and hit that like button. A team last week who went off, who we talked about a little bit, but didn't quite heavy up on them. Tampa Bay going into a game at New Orleans. And this is a divisional game, one with a decent total here. And we just saw Jameis have really one of his better games he's probably had as a pro. New Orleans on the other side, Teddy Bridgewater not throwing it very deep. Some could say noodle-armed, but also keeping it mostly in control, I guess you could say. Michael Thomas going to be chalky, reasonable prices. His price is pretty low on a few sites, DraftKings in particular. Alex, how are you feeling about this game here? And can Tampa Bay do it again going against the New Orleans team who really hasn't been that great, but did seem a little resilient with Teddy Bridgewater kind of not pulling enough of his weight offensively?
I think going to New Orleans makes some sense. They, as you're saying, they haven't been that good with Breeze out, and they're favored in this game. The projected total is 24 to 21, and I mean that's not a lot of points, but that's a lot with Teddy Bridgewater in, and the guys have some price decreases. So I think that going to Kumara and to Michael Thomas makes a lot of sense.
Chris, how are you feeling about the New Orleans side here? Because they are at home and Michael Thomas at a reasonable price. Kumara also, he's tough to get to at his price, but how are you feeling about these guys?
Mike Thomas, he's 6,600. It's kind of hard to overlook that. The targets are there. I just wish that he would get more red zone targets. I mean, he's such a big person to throw to and a great target for a quarterback. And I think that Bridgewater is still getting used to it. I feel like, they've been kind of a little bit safe. But also Kumara has benefited from that. A lot of checkdowns to Kumara, a lot of short passes, and then runs after the catch have been huge for Kumara as well. To be quite honest with you, I think both options are very interesting. I think I would like to see more out of Thomas. But I mean, at 6,600, it's like, I think he can not only get there, but there's definitely upside with it. So I don't mind either play. I think either player is in play.
I mean, even without him getting the red zone targets, you could certainly see a 10 catch, 100-yard day for him. And at that price point, that's more than enough to make it work. So he does seem like he's worth his ownership. On the other side, we do have, it looks like some ownership going to Tampa Bay. And I've seen a popular narrative, some people in the chat talking about it right now. Marshawn Lattimore giving up the most yards overall in the league to wide receivers is a stat I've seen going around a lot on Twitter this week. And Mike Evans is going to be getting shadowed by him, it looks like, or that's the expectation. And Chris Godwin had that monster week last week as well. Alex, are you willing to go to Evans and Godwin this week after it seems like ownership people perhaps chasing that big game that they had overall at the Rams?
I'm willing to go there. It's not a favorite play of mine because I think they have been hot recently. Mike Evans a couple weeks back, and then last week it was Godwin. So I think these are going to be preferred players for your average fantasy player. So that doesn't really get me that excited. But I mean, they're great players, so there's a substantial chance that they'll have monster games. So I'll have some shots, especially if I'm taking other players from the game like Michael Thomas or Kumara.
Chris, how are you feeling about Tampa Bay here, following up that big game they had last week?
I think I agree with Alex. I mean, there's some interest, but I feel like there's other areas that I definitely want to attack. I think Mike Evans is interesting. Lattimore has given up almost 400 yards on the season, so that's something where if he's going to be covering him, definitely would want to go that way. I could see a lot of people going to Godwin again after his big week. But to be quite honest with you, I don't know. I mean, we saw Saints D this past week really kind of shut down Prescott and the Amari Cooper connection. And I'm just curious if that can lean over again against Winston and his, wide receiver core. But I don't know. I'm still indifferent about this game. I like the Saints side a little bit more in their weapons, but I don't mind running it back with like Evans if I'm going to be putting in like, a Thomas and having that back-to-back wide receiver type of correlation.
Makes sense. All right, let's keep it moving here. We do have a game which we should hit on at least a couple important players in this one. Jacksonville at Carolina. Leonard Fournette over 200 yards rushing last week against Denver. Certainly looking a little more comfortable, even though that offensive line not doing him a ton of favors. 4.4 yards after contact per rush for Leonard Fournette. He's been looking good. I defended him a lot last week and then didn't play enough, which felt great to defend him on literally every show I did and then not have him in lineups. Christian McCaffrey on the other side, a guy who unequivocally one of the best running backs in the league right now. Barry Sanders is what people are calling him now because he's in fact white and plays like Barry Sanders. Getting 27 touches a game, looking stellar. Alex, how are you feeling about these guys here? Fournette going to be a little bit owned. McCaffrey going to be one of the chalk plays of the week. Are you going to both these guys?
Yeah, definitely. I think McCaffrey with Kyle Allen and at QB has been he's been really impressive. I mean, he should get more checkdowns, and he has been getting a ton of catches. He was targeted 10 times last week, which is that's absurd, like for a running back, and that really makes me think he's the top play of the week. On the other side, Fournette, we had seen he was getting the lion's share of the work in Jacksonville, and it hadn't equaled a large fantasy performance until it did last week. So I'm still just as high on him as how strong he is as a player. But the fact that he's going to be so much higher on makes it a little bit harder to get an edge by playing him. But I'll have a ton.
Chris, how are you feeling about both running backs here? Both guys very highly touched. Fournette getting 22 a game, McCaffrey over 27. Are you going to these guys?
I mean, the volume is absolutely insane. I mean, how do you not play McCaffrey? He's played all but 4 snaps this entire year so far through 4 games. Pretty incredible. Always on the field. I mean, dual threat running back. I mean, regardless of kind of Jacksonville's defense, it doesn't matter. But I could also see Carolina throwing a little bit more, especially with Jalen Ramsey out. So that's pretty interesting. I feel like Curtis Samuel is very interesting now considering that news. But I mean, both sides of the ball with the running game, it's volume. And I mean, I feel like McCaffrey, you can't go wrong. It's a no-brainer. Fournette, he's still a little bit lower priced. And I mean, with the volume that he's doing, it's hard to go away from someone who's 90% of the snaps, he's on the field and he's getting all the touches. And then also they're putting him in the passing game. So his value has increased tremendously because, you know, he's now a dual threat running back, especially with what we've seen as of late with the target shares that he's getting with the pass catching opportunities. So you can't go wrong with either side.
Yeah, 5.8 targets per game for Fournette, which is certainly an increase. And he's been involved in getting highly touched. Both these guys are looking pretty solid for this week. Let's keep going here a game with the Jets heading into Philly. And Philly's got one of the higher implied totals of the week going against the Jets defense, who's appeared mostly hapless, but they're not poorly graded by PFF, which is sort of maybe an indicator that they're due for some positive regression. Alex, there's a Philadelphia team again, no Deshaun Jackson out there, so we have a somewhat more concentrated target load. What were you feeling here on the Philadelphia attack? And I guess also Jordan Howard, is he in play?
Not really big on Howard. I think that it was kind of a fluke that he had such a big game last week, and it's probably a hot hand situation in Philadelphia. So if he doesn't start off hot, it'll probably go to Sanders or to Sproles. I do like on the other side, I think that Le'Veon Bell is a pretty solid play. He has been getting just as much volume as any other running back, and he might be going under the radar because he hasn't really turned it into big fantasy performances yet.
Is there no concern that perhaps Philly just blows the doors off of them and Bell is, I mean, he still would, you think, be involved in the passing game, but is that not a worry for you at all?
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't equal a lot of rushing attempts for him, but I think that he's good enough at catching the ball that he could rack up a big total just based on PPR.
Chris, how are you feeling about Philly here? One of the higher implied totals on the slate, and Wentz has been throwing the ball fairly well. And even though his wide receiving core is a little bit banged up, he still does have some quality guys out there. Zach Ertz also at a not a ton of ownership, and really in a week where there aren't a lot of great tight ends, he could certainly be a viable play as well.
I think there's a lot of upside with Ertz, especially with the low ownership. I think people are just worried because Jamal Adams, who is one of the best strong safeties in the league, will have that assignment, I think, of picking up on Ertz and a lot of defensive schemes. But outside of that, I mean, we have to look at the Jets secondary. They're one of the weakest and one of the worst in the league, regardless of the PFF grading. I mean, if you look at the last couple of years, they've struggled significantly with slot receivers and wide receiver threes. And, for me, looking at this team, I feel like they're probably going to get blown out. And I think this is going to benefit Le'Veon Bell. And I think Alex made a great point. I think Le'Veon Bell's in a very interesting spot. He's clearly the main usage on this offense. And with Sam Darnold out, I mean, they're going to go to him in the running game, obviously, but it's where the pass catching, I think, is most valuable for Le'Veon Bell. A lot of checkdowns for this backup quarterback. If you look at the Jets offense all year so far, they've only had 2 plays, which is the lowest in the league, of over 25 yards. So they are the worst team when it comes to big plays. Then I think this also benefits Bell as well, because I mean, it's a safety net. Obviously a DraftKings PPR is huge. So I definitely see Le'Veon Bell being in a position to be one of those sneaky running backs this week.
Is there any hope for the Jets passing game at all here, given the fact they might be playing from behind? And also Philly's giving up over 320 passing yards per game. Luke Falk, certainly not the guy you'd want out there. If Sam Darnold win, I think you'd have a little more hope. But how do you feel about the passing attack? And guys like Robbie Anderson or Jamison Crowder have any use?
I could see taking some shots on Crowder. He hasn't really had a big game yet this year, but he is out there almost every play along with Robbie Anderson. But Crowder has more targets this year at 28 to 18. So he's probably the number one guy I'd pick from the team. Robbie Anderson, I remember last year he had some crazy games, but it will be a little bit tougher for that to happen with Le'Veon Bell on the team as well as Crowder.
All right. Chris, any interest at all in this Jets passing attack, given the fact the Philly's just been pretty bad in the secondary?
To be honest with you, I kind of like the Eagles defense in this matchup. I don't trust anyone really besides Bell on the Jets side of the ball. I just, if Darnold was in, it would be a different story. I feel like there would be more upside, especially to Crowder. I think we saw it in week 1 where when Darnold and him connected, I think he had, I don't know if it was 14 or 17 targets. It was pretty high up there, but it was just a ridiculous amount. But I mean, outside of that, there's really nothing there for me. And, if I'm going to go value, I think I'm going to go look in other directions. But if I do game stack this, I don't know if I would want to stack Anderson as far as Anderson or Crowder as far as like a return wide receiver if I'm stacking the Eagle side. I just don't know. But I mean, outside of that, I just really like Bell.
All right, that makes sense. Let's keep it moving here because New England. So somebody in the chat was asking about Tom Brady, but I'm more curious about the defense because New England's defense for me, been one of the better plays I've had in my lineups pretty much every week. They bailed me out last week and not a ton of ownership. This week, the price is so high, but they're going against a Washington team who has a 13.5 point implied total. He says in the morning, me checking and pulling those numbers. Colt McCoy getting the start, not Dwayne Haskins. But Colt McCoy, a guy who does give up some INTs, does take some sacks. Certainly not a great quarterback. I would say arguably a downgrade from Case Keenum. Alex, how are you feeling about the New England defense, and would you be willing to pay up for them because they are the highest priced defense industry-wide?
I'm probably not going to pay up for them just because of the opportunity cost. I mean, the amount you're paying means that you can't get as many good players in your lineup. And I think there are some good cheap defenses. Like one I'm looking to this week is the Titans versus Buffalo. Josh Allen has been known to throw a pick or two, and they're just really, really cheap.
Yeah, that hurts to hear. I would have liked them more going against Matt Barkley, but you're right, Josh Allen, coming off of a concussion too, which, as you know, is a car crash survivor, Alex. That can certainly take its toll. Would you have any interest in Tom Brady here? Because he is a guy, somebody in the chat was saying he's going to throw for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns, but it does seem like New England has not necessarily blown the doors off of people when they don't have to. How are you feeling about Tom Brady and the offense overall with a game with a pretty high implied total?
Yeah, to be honest, I have to agree that he's going to throw for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. But
on the nose.
But my contrarian pick of the week is going to throw for 600 yards and 8 touchdowns. So there's no need to get Brady in there.
Chris, how are you feeling about this New England offense with Tom Brady perhaps throwing for upwards of 1,000 yards in this game?
I didn't know that he was projected to have that much. So now I have to go back and readjust my projections, and he might turn out to be the number 1 overall quarterback for me. But no, I think it's hard to really decipher and gauge where the production will go because he does spread it around so much. And so that makes kind of always someone interesting. But I think Edelman at 6,500 on FanDuel is a little interesting. I mean, I think he's someone you can always rely on, especially if he's healthy and he plays in this game. I mean, we're looking at a Redskins secondary that, especially Josh Norman, that's, really been horrible all year. And I mean, they're going to be going now against one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I think Dorsett's interesting. I think Gordon. I think if you want to kind of just do something that Alex mentioned earlier with the Falcons offense is, plug in different wide receivers from this team in different lineups, especially if you're multi-entering. I think that'd be most beneficial. But I think the biggest thing is Rex Burkhead is out. And I really think in this matchup, I could see myself going to some Sony Michelle.
I agree with that strongly. I think Sony Michelle's an interesting play here and has not gotten there yet, but still getting 15.5 rushing attempts per game, certainly not involved in the passing game in any meaningful way. And a bit of a tell when he's in there because he's just not involved in the passing game. But Alex, how are you feeling about Sony Michelle? Because he doesn't project terribly. Actually, he projects really poorly for you, it looks like, but certainly a guy who can be better, it seems.
We'll have to go back and update some of the projections for the ruled out players because that hour this morning when I was going to do it, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to. But I think that it may be a little bit of a boost to him, but I think the Patriots have enough running back depth that probably Brandon Bolden or Damian Harris will come in and take some of that work, as well as James White maybe going a few more plays running around.
Yeah, I mean, Sony Michelle, it's worth noting. He just looks really bad on the year. But I mean, certainly you would think due for some positive regression, but just 2.8 yards per attempt, only 1.9 yards after contact per attempt, but still getting red zone rushes, still getting 3 red zone rushes a game. But yeah, Sony Michelle, just an interesting player who does not look good. And New England fans will certainly bitch about him quite a bit, but seems like he's got to have some better days. And Washington's certainly a defense that can allow that. Alex, let me turn it over to you. Any games or players that we didn't discuss that you might feel like are a bit overlooked?
One guy, I got some contrarian plays brewing here, but let's see here. The Chicago, I mean, they have a good matchup versus Oakland, and Chase Daniel isn't really that much of a downgrade from Trubisky in the passing game. So one guy I'm looking to is Allen Robinson, the clear number 1 guy in Chicago. He can catch the short balls and he can catch the longer balls, and that should make the quarterback change not that big a deal. And I think that he could be pretty sneaky.
Chris, anything that you're seeing in overall that you want to hit on? Any games that we didn't touch on?
You know, I'm trying to think. We didn't touch on San Diego, and I really wanted to touch on Keenan Allen. He's going to really have a difficult matchup this week. We were talking about it earlier on the show, Sal and I, but Denver's defense, I think they've only given up 1 touchdown through the air, if I'm not mistaken, which is a really tough matchup, in my opinion, for Allen. And the reason why I say this is because I feel like we're going to see an approach this week with the running game, and I could see the 50-50 balance coming between Gordon and Eckler. And I think both running games are interesting, and I want to just look into it a little bit more. But I think what we've seen lately from Denver, especially last week. I mean, Fournette, ran all over them. It was absolutely unreal. But we've seen Josh Jacobs as well do the same thing to this Denver's defense. And now with Chubb out, I think they're going to be a little bit more vulnerable as well. So I think Gordon and Eckler are strong here. And if you guys haven't realized, Eckler's price went down $900 on FanDuel. And we don't know necessarily what's going to take place with the approach. How many carries is Gordon going to get? And so I think this is a very interesting play, especially for Eckler, and could be somewhat interesting or more contrarian than what people are thinking.
Yeah, but before we get to our contrarian picks, Alex, it is worth hitting on real fast this Chargers run game overall, because there are some real questions here. I mean, Austin Eckler seems like he earned himself a role, and he was involved last year when Melvin Gordon was in there. Melvin Gordon is the bell cow back. So how do you see this one breaking down?
I think it will be a little bit worse of a spot compared to when Troy Maine Pope is the backup. But I think that it's still a great spot for Eckler. And I'm kind of curious to see, will Melvin Gordon kind of just take the Justin Jackson role this week and maybe get a third of the snaps or something to 2/3 for Eckler, or is he going to be a little bit more involved than Jackson? I'd probably lean a little bit towards the latter, but I don't have a strong feeling about one way or the other.
All right, that makes sense. All right, let's get to it. Of course, guys, hit that like button because the contrarian picks get stronger with each individual like that we get. So please show a little love down there right now. And of course, also thanks to Fantasydraft once again. They are the official home of Rake-Free Daily Fantasy. Go check them out right now. As we mentioned earlier in the show, Shit My Money took down that Big Hooters main event. That is one of the largest Rake-Free tournaments, the largest Rake-Free tournament you'll find industry-wide. Alex had a great showing as well. A lot of great value just going there because of the overlay, less sharp field overall. There's a lot of situations that are going to help you out. And of course, the Rake-Free Daily Fantasy is the most important part. So go to fantasydraft.com right now and use the promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, for your free 7-day trial and your first $1,000 on Rake-Free entries. All right, Alex, let's go to you first. Contrarian QB pick. Who will it be?
I have a paired QB and wide receiver this week. Ooh. I think one guy that is going to go under the radar because he hasn't played a game this season is Golden Tate. And I also like Daniel Jones. He showed that he can win people big money with both the rushing and the throwing. So I think that makes a little nice contrarian pairing since both of them are sub 3%.
Chris, how about you? Who's your contrarian QB pick?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins. I feel like, where we're at right now with him, this is a game where if he wanted to show people that the passing game can be strong in Minnesota, what better matchup than New York in this week, unexperienced secondary. He's sub 1% right now, projected ownership. And I agree with the stack. I'm going to stack him with a wide receiver that is also sub 5% in Diggs or Thielen.
All right. And I will go with the ginger rifle, Andy Dalton, because I feel like he's at home and you can't do much worse. I think much like Marcus Mariota last week, sometimes a guy just looks so bad in one of those Monday night or Thursday night games and they're just due for a bounce back. And it does seem like being back at home against the pace up spot with Arizona. I think Andy Dalton can get there. Chris, I'll turn it back to you. Running back contrarian pick. Who will it be?
For running back, man, I thought I had mine. To be honest with you, I'm going to go with Melvin Gordon. Right now he's rating a little bit higher than what I've seen over the last 2 days for me and some of the projections I've been doing. Sub 4%, 6,800. And, I say this, I'm not going to have a ton of him, but I am going to have some because I am interested to see how they utilize him. I feel like with Justin Jackson not being in the mix right now, I could really see him getting a good amount of shares this week, maybe 10, 12. But the biggest shares is what I'm more wanting is the goal line. And if he can get a couple goal line carries, I could really see him, hitting value at 6,800.
Alex, how about you? Who'd be your contrarian running back pick?
I think the ownership on running back is pretty efficient this week, so I don't have a strong take. So I'll go with a sentimental one. Go with my boy Tariq Cohen. Coach called me and gave me the inside info. A lot of short passes for Chase Daniel, and that's where Tariq Cohen can take it and run it in the end zone. So he's pretty sneaky, probably won't hit, but has that high upside.
All right, I'm going to go Sony Michelle. I know we just talked about him, but I do think he's been so bad that he just cannot be as bad as he looks. And he was a guy who was pretty decent last year. I think the volume's there, not a great PPR play, obviously, but a guy who can get 2 touchdowns fairly easily in a spot against Washington where really all it takes is Josh Gordon falling down at the 1 yard line. And all of a sudden, Sony Michelle will have a good day. So he'll be my guy. Alex, I guess you already gave a contrarian wide receiver, but give us a second one.
Oh man, I was only prepared for one. All right, let me try to make some magic happen because Tate is really the one I feel strongly about. I suppose. Let's see. What is Allen Robinson's ownership? Because he's 6%. I think he should be way higher. I don't think that Chicago's in that bad a spot this week versus Oakland. In fact, that's a great matchup. So I'm going to have a lot of Robinson.
Alex, very big on that London game, huh? You're big on some tea and crumpets in your lineups this week, I suppose. Chris, how about you? Contrarian wide receiver.
Yeah. Keep in mind, London, it always seems like there's a high scoring game there. And, London, they want to see excitement. They want to see touchdowns. So I think there's a narrative there where teams are notified before the game that there's no defense should be played. So I could see a shootout here potentially just because of NFL and trying to make money purposes. But going to the Jaguars game, I think Curtis Samuel is a sneaky wideout, sub 5% owned. Jalen Ramsey will be out, so he could get the assignment of either AJ Bouye or Trey Herndon. If it's Trey Herndon, I really like the matchup. Trey Herndon has struggled significantly this year against slot wide receivers. So I could see Curtis Samuel. He's averaged 10 targets per game so far through 4 games. So I feel like there's upside there.
All right. And for me, I really don't have a strong control. I feel like a lot of the guys I do like are going to be fairly well owned. So I guess I'll go Will Fuller just because Atlanta's been so bad. And we talked about Fuller and, there are a lot of negatives going against him, but he is a big play guy and has historically been one. And maybe he's just not as bad as he looks this year. So that'd be the hope. And here's the fun one, Alex. Fade of the week. We killed it last week. You faded Austin Eckler in the pick. I faded Wayne Gallman. So let's keep building that momentum. Maybe guys build the lineup with the fades. Alex, who's your fade of the week?
My fade of the week is Daniel Jones because I'm hoping you guys fade him, so I'll have more of a share. But as far as chalk fades of the week, ones that I might actually fade, Aaron Jones. I think that he should get a bigger piece of the pie with Jamal Williams out. But I just don't think the pie is going to be that big versus Dallas, and Green Bay is projected to do pretty poorly this week as far as total points. So I don't see much reason to go to him.
Chris, who would be your fade of the week? Oh man. I guess, man, I got to be careful because I've been wrong the last 2 weeks and I really can't go for a third straight week. So I think I'm going to try to kind of play it safe, but not really. But I'm going to say my fade of the week is, I'm going to go with McCaffrey.
Ooh, any reason why? Just because you want to be contrarian?
I just want to be contrarian.
Okay, I'm going to say mine is going to be Leonard Fournette, just because I do think people are going to chase that 200-yard game. And I do like the volume there, but the ownership's a bit high, as Alex mentioned earlier. And I think Carolina's defense, they're a better pass defense right now, but I do think they have some upside in the run game. And, I don't know. I got to pick somebody too. That's my fate of the week. Watch it below. Play those guys in a lineup, because if you had done that last week, you would have had a hell of a game. So please do that right now. And guys, hit that like button real fast. Of course, go to awesemo.com/join to see all the packages we have. Thank you, Fantasy Draft. And right now, Chris Randone, even though you are an employee of Awesemo, even though you do all our shows, this is what we do here, much like Hot Ones that I'm stealing it from. What do you want to plug? Because we appreciate you being a guest.
Man, I mean, just follow me on Twitter at Chris Randone. I mean, other than that, not really too much to say. Just I guess good luck this weekend. Alex, someone said you're at the hospital, but I think you're at the airport, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So just make sure you take care of yourself.
All right. That's a nice way to use your open floor to tell Alex to take care of himself. Avoid car wrecks if you can. Alex, any parting words for us before we go and close it off here on the contrary?
No, just thanks everyone for watching. And based on last week, maybe making a lineup with all of our phases of the week could be the move.
Yeah, triple stack that McCaffrey one with Fournette, especially. Those are going to be real fades that are going to blow up in Chris in my face, I'm sure. But thank you guys for watching. Hit that like button before you go. We appreciate the support a ton. Check out all the content we have. Check out Live Before Lock tomorrow. Check out Chris Randone's shows, rather. In the last 2 days have been really strong. And we'll see you guys again soon. Enjoy your weekends and good luck.